Hello, everybody. This is Stephen. Tom Moriarty and I recently started a little recording series that I think I called What Blocks Us from Getting What We Want. And I've been talking about my experience long term of feeling frustrated. And I think I formulated it as I can't get what I want as long as I want it, because there's some inkling or evidence that if I stop wanting it, then I can get it. And I talked about that in terms of paradoxical intention. And by the way, I'm assuming that you've watched part one and part two. In part two, we were talking about some resources from several videos that we both watched, and I think I neglected to make it clear where those videos were coming from. I mentioned episodes 10 and 11 especially, but I forgot to mention the name of the series that they were coming from. It's John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series on YouTube, which consists of 50 approximately hour-long lectures, and it's very good, and I highly recommend it. And John Vervaeke is a cognitive scientist, and in those episodes, he was talking about the way we frame our problems, or the way we frame reality. And oftentimes, the way we frame things prevents us from solving our problems. And he shows an example of that called the 9-dot problem, where you're supposed to connect 9 dots, 4 straight lines, without lifting the pen. And most people are unable to solve it because of two unconscious framing assumptions that they make that prevent them from solving the problem. And the two assumptions involved are, first, they frame the figure as a square, and they frame it as a connect the dots problem. In other words, you can't go outside the square, but in order to solve it with the solution that Vervaeke gives, you have to twice go outside the square and make a non-dot turn that allows you to solve it and complete the problem. So that's an example of how we frame problems in a way that prevents us from solving them. And I think this is very, very prevalent. And of course, Vervaeke talks about in great detail about ways in which we can, for instance, de-automatize our consciousness and become aware of the bad framings that we're doing that are preventing us from solving our problems. So I'd like to go further and talk about my situation in terms of some of the possible misframings that I've discovered that have landed me in this feeling and dilemma of I can't get what I want. So let me just start talking about some of them. First, let me talk about something that Vervaeke goes into in episode 13 of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis: Buddhism and parasitic processing. parasitic processing is a complex phenomenon that Vervaeke explains and shows a diagram of it actually that you can find out about by watching episode 13 of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. It's something that is always threatening to cause us to lose our agency. And that's the main problem that Vervaeke says that Buddhism and things like Buddhism and religion and martial arts and other things are trying to solve this problem, that the very processes that make us adaptive can also trap us and cause us to lose our agency. And it's a perennial problem that is just part of the human condition. So let me talk about some of these misframings that I've discovered in myself. For instance, I can't get what I want means I'm failing to get what I want. My efforts are misfiring. I'm failing. Well, as Vervaeke points out, I think in probably in episode 13, but it might be another one, because I've listened to so many episodes now, I can't, I'm not sure. But one of the things he says that a therapist might ask someone who comes and says, I'm a failure. Everything that I do goes wrong. Well, everything? I mean, did you successfully get here today? Yeah. Well, did you get up and get dressed this morning? Yeah. Well, what do you mean by everything? Well, I don't mean everything. Well, what do you mean? And so there we have a misframing, an unclarity of thought, where the person is saying everything fails, but it's, when you examine it, it's not really everything. So I examined myself a while back, and I realized pretty quickly, well, I do get what I want sometimes in small things, what I would consider more trivial things, but it's the big things where I end up not getting what I want a lot of the time. So I'm failing. Well, how do I decide what constitutes a failure? And that by itself would a redefining or a reframing of the idea of failure would go a long way towards alleviating this dynamic. I think I've been framing it as a failure to get what I say I want. Well, what do I really want? If I haven't reflected deeply on that, then how can I say that I don't get what I want? Maybe failing to get what I think I want actually causes me to get what I really want, but I don't recognize it because I don't know what I really want. And how do I know that failure should not happen? Because there's an embedded misframing or assumption there that I shouldn't fail. But how did I come to that conclusion? Well, you would might say, well, it's natural. Everybody believes that, and maybe almost everybody does believe that. It seems so self-evident that normally we would never think to question that, but um, that's the problem with most of these pernicious misframings is that they're things that most people would never normally think to question. Is it true that failure should not happen? Well, what do I mean by should not? And who's determining what should or should not happen? Um, yeah, there's like a normative judgment embedded in that um, certain things that are happening should not happen, and that is a formula for unhappiness. Unhappiness created solely by the mind. Let's recognize that. It's not in the events themselves, and Vervaeke talks about this also in connection with in the episode on Stoicism, because the Stoics advocated separating the event from the meaning. And as Vervaeke points out, that's kind of the cornerstone of most modern uh, contemporary cognitive therapies, is separating the event from the meaning, because the event itself has already happened and there's no way to make it unhappen, or we don't have nearly as much control over events as we like to think. So the Stoics were about not concerning ourselves with things that are beyond our control. So, what is, at least theoretically, in our control is the meaning that the mind gives to the event. And as I've started to show, those meanings are often permeated with these unconscious assumptions and misframings that cause us to suffer. And then um, it progresses to not just I fail all the time, which is obvious, which is not true, but that's something that the mind likes to say all the time, or everything, or everybody, when that's not really true. But what what follows is not just I fail, but I am a failure. I am a loser. Now we're really getting into questions of the way we frame our identity. And this is at the root of a lot of um, self-image problems and pernicious, deeply rooted um, suffering based on who we think we are. And it's these kinds of things that we have to question, I think, if we're to have any chance of cutting through this problem that I brought up. I can't get what I want. I'm failing. I'm a failure. And so I think I'm going to leave it at that for this time and come back to it another time. I don't think I'm quite finished with this topic yet, but I hope you're getting something out of it. And I like doing these, so I'm going to continue to do them. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.